So far, I've produced 2 videos about the topic 10 philosophical texts that I would bring to a desert island if I didn't know how long I was going to be there and I wanted to have stuff to keep my mind active, texts that I really enjoy, thinkers that I want to engage with. And a lot of people have been asking me, okay, so philosophical texts, that's one thing. What would you do in terms of literary texts that you would bring to a desert island for the same sort of circumstances? And what I'm going to say here will, in some of these cases, perhaps seem a little bit like cheating because I do have some short story collections that I would bring along, as you'll see in just a moment. But I did manage to think this through and come up with 10 texts that I would really enjoy having and getting to read and probably reread many times and think about on the desert island, because who knows how long I'd be there. Maybe a couple months, maybe years, maybe the rest of my life. So it's kind of a momentous thing. And this is a great exercise, I think, for any of you to do. Odds are, as you may have noticed if you watch the 10 philosophical texts one that I did, it'll change over the course of your life. I did one 10 years ago, and then I did one this year, and I think of those 10 books, I only kept 3, and the others were replaced by other texts and thinkers who I wanted to spend time on. So I'm going to give you these. Maybe 5-10 years down the line, I might revise this list, although I suspect I'll probably keep some of these with me. So number 1, and the only one from ancient literature, Homer's The Odyssey. I first read it as an 8th grader, didn't really understand a lot of what I was doing, and I don't know if my teacher was particularly good, but it was a great story for me. I'd read previous kids versions of the Odyssey before, but reading the actual Odyssey was, for me, it gets better every time that I go through it. I prefer it to the Iliad, in part because I like Odysseus, and I also like the second hero in it, who is Telemachus. And I also like Athena, who loves Odysseus. So I think it's a really awesome story, and I probably would never get sick of rereading the Odyssey. So that's number 1 for me. I've got another piece of what we consider classic literature, and this is much more close to us in time. It is The Possessed, or sometimes also translated as The Demons, by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Some of you may know that this is my favorite work by Dostoevsky. A lot of people will talk up Crime and Punishment or Brothers Karamazov, and those are good, but I consider this his finest work. I think Albert Camus shared that sentiment since he actually chose to make this into a play. And what I like about it is it's got a more sustained clash of living and thought out philosophies in its characters than any of the other works. I'd say it's better than Brothers Karamazov in that respect, which is probably too long. It's got some good action, some plots going on. I really do enjoy this one. And there's some great speeches by certain of the characters, some cool clashes with each other. Actually, I'm looking at a dog-eared page that I've got right here where Stavrovin and Shatov are arguing with each other about gods and people and good and evil and all that. So another really great text for me, certainly. And then I have 2 other pieces of what we could consider classic literature, and they are collections of poetry. And I'm fortunate in that I've got the bilingual editions of these with the original language in one place and then the English translation, which is always a little iffy for poetry in the other place. 2 languages that I read, German and French. So we'll do it in chronological order. We got a book that I bought back when I was in my early 20s, in part because I love Charles Baudelaire and his poetry and his thought so much. I really enjoy it. So, Fleur de Mal, Flowers of Evil. This is an interesting one because it's got all of the English stuff first, and then it's got the French originals long after them. And, the translations are good, but it's nice to go back to Baudelaire's original French as well. And I really do enjoy these. And actually, this collection doesn't just include the Fleur de Mal, but also Spleen et Dal, and all sorts of other things as well. So this is really quite good. And then I think many of you know that my favorite poet is Rainer Maria Rilke. I teach him quite often in certain of my classes. It's tough to pick when it comes to Rilke, like which poetry collection you should take. And I ended up going with the Book of Hours, in part because so many of those poems really speak to me. They're early poems, but I would say that this one had to beat out one other collection, the Dunio Elegies, which are pretty amazing stuff, written closer to the end of Rilke's life. But yeah, there's something about his writing and he speaks in simple terms, but there's so much depth there, but it's not one that you like immediately descend to. You got to kind of work at it in order to get it. And I've never not found reading Rilke moving in some way. I won't always say that it is clear to me what's being said or what its relevance to me is, but I really do love the poetry. So those are 4 books. And then, as I thought about it, my tastes tend to lean towards what we call speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, some other things as well. And so you're going to get a lot of that in the next 6 that follow. One of these is fantasy, and I remember reading this back in college, Titus Groan by Mervyn Peake. And if I could pick the whole trilogy, I think I would. Gormenghast. And some people are detractors of Titus alone. I still think it's quite good. But this is the one that it begins with. And I remember sitting in my college dorm room. You can see how worn this book is. And reading this for the first time and, thinking to myself, wow, the writing in this is like what watercolors in the hands of a really great artist are on paper. That's what these words are like for Mervyn Peake. It's just gorgeous, beautiful, amazing prose, and it's a very interesting story that's being told about this place, this castle, where these people who are very much driven by, traditions and duties, but also rivalries with each other and obligations and interpretations are engaging with each other. So, yeah, I really like this particular work. The next one will kind of surprise you, I imagine, in part because it's one of so many in a series that the author has written, but it's the start, and it's a really great book by itself. It could be a standalone, but it also, for me, because I've read the other books, as I'm reading this one or rereading it, I'll be like, oh yeah, that's going to lead to this and this and this and this. So it is C.J. Chera's Down Below Station. Just an amazing science fiction novel with all these interesting factions and moving parts and characters. It's a pretty substantive book. I mean, she's written longer since then, but this one's, over 432 pages of little print. So there's a lot going on there, and I really enjoy rereading Chera. So that's good. All right, so now we come to some things that might be cheating, might not. A lot of people know that one of my favorite authors, Jorge Luis Borges, we've got this nice collected fictions thing, which actually bundles together a bunch of his various works from the earliest Universal History of Iniquity, 1935, to Shakespeare's Memory, 1983. You could say that's cheating. So if I had to pick just one of the books in here that is compiled in it, I think I probably would take The Garden of Forking Paths, which is 8 stories, right, including Tlan, Ukbar, Orbis, Tertius, The Circular Ruins, Lottery in Babylon, Library of Babel, Garden of Forking Paths. Obviously not all of Borges' amazing stories, but 5 heavy hitters right there at the start. But if you let me have this book, I would take this collection along with me, because there's so many other really wonderful stories in here that I enjoy so much, like 3 Versions of Judas, Cult of the Phoenix, The Theologians, House of Asterion, The Zahir, and we could go on and on and on. So there's so many great stories in this. So I would take this if I can. We may as well jump right into another one that some people might consider cheating as well. So I've got this wonderful volume, The Rediscovery of Man, the complete short science fiction of Cordwainer Smith. Cordwainer Smith, by the way, is somebody who was born here in Milwaukee and wound up, it's a pseudonym for Linebarger, who became a defense analyst, did all sorts of other really cool stuff, wrote other treatises on warfare, but he also has this amazing set of short stories that begin with No, Not Rogoff and finish up with Down to a Sunless Sea. These are all part of the instrumentality of mankind narrative. There's some other stories gathered in here as well. And, they are so filled with humanity, you could say, even when we're talking about under people and, people who've been modified so that they can handle the difficulties of space. And this actually contains one of my favorite short stories of all time, which is fairly early in, The Game of Rat and Dragon, which I've done a reading of in the past. If you haven't ever read that, you should check it out. And that'll give you a taste for Cordwainer Smith. So that's another one that's got a bunch of stories together in it. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that was number 8. Number 9 is a novel, and I happen to have it in this Library of America collection. It's bundled together in this volume, 5 novels of the 1960s and 70s by Philip K. Dick, along with 4 other really great novels. None of them are bad, and actually one of them is close to my favorite. My favorite story by Philip K. Dick is A Scanner Darkly. Used to be Man in the High Castle. I also really do like Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said. There's some others that I like, but eventually I came to the point where Scanner Darkly became my favorite, and I just think it's a wonderful novel, some meditations on addiction, on secrecy, on whether we have free will or not, and so Dick is at his finest in that. And we'll finish up. So I've got this massive tome. And if you're inclined to be super generous with me or, to let me cheat in a way, I might pick this, right? You notice this is the Books of Earthsea, this illustrated version, which has got some great, illustrations by Charles Vess. So this is a little over, actually not quite 1,000-page volume. It looks bigger than it actually is, and it has all 6 of Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea books in it, because the 5th book is actually short stories. There's a couple other short stories, the short stories that she wrote about Earthsea before she got going, and The Word of Unbinding, The Rule of Names. She's got a couple other ones in here as well. But if you want to be a stickler, and I can only pick one of the Earthsea books, the one that I would pick is the 4th Earthsea novel, Tehanu. And this is where Le Guin returns to Earthsea after spending decades writing other stuff. And it's got the same characters, Ged, the Archmage, who now has lost all of his power. The young prince, Aaron, has become King Lebanon. Arha from the Tombs of Atuan has now become Tenar, an older lady in late middle age who is bringing up a horribly abused child. And I won't tell you what's so special about her because I don't want to spoil anything for you. And they all have to kind of make their way in a world where Ged has lost his magic and Tenar is struggling with what to do, and they encounter prejudice and they encounter robbers, and they develop. And I will spoil one thing. Ged and Tenar get together, and it's kind of a love story among so many other things. But it's such a great novel that deepens the world of Earthsea that we've had in the 3 previous novels and the earlier short stories. So those are my 10 books. I could be pretty happy. There's many others, of course, that I think I would like to bring. There's other authors who I really enjoy. I toyed with Diderot's Jacques le Fataliste and his, Jacques the Fatalist and his master, which I have a copy of that I bought way back in graduate school and reread occasionally. I really like Roger Zelazny. There's some others as well. But when I think about it, those are probably where I would get the biggest emotional, intellectual, enjoyment-wise bang for my buck. So you can think about what would be the 10 books of literature. Could be poetry, could be, I suppose, essays, could be novels, short stories that you would bring if you were going to be on a desert island for who knows how long. Some interminable length, could be months, could be the rest of your life. Who would you bring? You know who I would bring, and so we'll just wrap it up here. You can leave your own lists in the comments if you want to. If you find these books particularly compelling and you enjoy them, you can drop a little note about that below as well. This is obviously going to be a rather subjective listing. It's not some claim that these are the best books ever or anything like that, but those are my books that I would select.